If you're looking for sewing inspiration and expertise, join Threads Insider. We promise to sharpen your sewing skills and to keep you entertained with complete access to more than 35 years of sewing content. Sign up now or give a gift to another sewer at threadsmagazine.com/insider.
Hi, and welcome to Sewing with Threads, the monthly podcast by the staff of Threads Magazine. I'm your host, editorial director Sarah McFarland, and our guest today is ChaCha N. Hudson. Hi, ChaCha.
Hey, Sarah. How are you?
I am very well, and how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
So, ChaCha, you have been a guest on our podcast before. It was episode 52, I think almost a year ago exactly, April 22.
And the time has passed so quick.
It sure has, yes. I wasn't on that episode with you, but we recently worked together on, I think, a really fun project. So, first I should give you a chance to introduce yourself. If you could tell our listeners what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is ChaCha, and I'm a fashion designer and also a fashion professor at Syracuse University. I'm also the co-director of the Fashion and Beauty Communications Milestone at Syracuse as well. And I enjoy creating community through art and, self-expression through art.
And I think last time you were on the podcast, ChaCha, you spoke about a special program at Syracuse about size-inclusive design.
Yes.
Yep. And the project we worked on together recently was a new e-learning class, Fashion Draping Fundamentals. And I really enjoyed working on this class with you. I got to go to your home studio there in Syracuse, and we went through a whole weekend. And I wanted to do this class, and I wanted to do this class with you because I think every garment sewer has this interior fashion designer that they need to let out. And draping seems to be such a great way to learn the fundamentals of creating garments.
Oh, it is. It is. I feel like when you're draping, especially when you're like, it may be a little bit intimidating when you first get into it, but really it's like you're able to express yourself on the dress form, which is what I love so much about it. You have certain designers who they would sketch first in order to create a design. Other designers, they look to textiles. That's usually how I work, look into textiles. But then there's other people who need to actually be able to see it in front of them. So draping is very good for those type of people who can't actually like get the ideas together in their mind first. They need to actually be able to see it. And with draping, you're putting it on the form and you're really able to see things come to life within seconds. And that's what I really like about it too.
So one of the very first things that I realized working on the class with you is how important fabric grain is when you're preparing those muslin pieces that you're going to put on the dress form. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I actually don't get many questions about that, only because when I post the drapes that I do, they're more like creative drapes. So they're not necessarily going to be on a body. So I don't have to worry about movement. I don't have to worry about how it's going to react to the movement from the human body because I'm doing it on a half scale dress form. So I guess maybe that's why I don't get a lot of questions about it, but it's very important, especially if you're draping in order to produce a garment. You know, the grain will determine how it moves on the body, how it moves with the body. So that's why it's very important, whether you're draping on the straight grain, the cross grain, whether you're draping on the bias, it'll all give you a different look and a different feel on the body.
I felt like I learned a lot from you about the relationship between fabric grain and your eventual pattern. Say, developing darts and, being sure that the grain is correct on the muslin that you're using to drape and how to connect the pieces of the muslin. So you've got, say, the bodice front and the bodice back and what your darts should look like and where they should end. I felt like I also learned a lot about pattern making.
Yeah. I'm so excited about this class because we kind of go through it all, right? Like we go through the draping process and then we go through marking and we go through truing And then we go through like, okay, well, now I want to make this into a pattern that I can continue to use over and over again. And not just continuing to use it, but also continuing to manipulate it into different designs, which I think is really cool. So when you talked about, you said that you learned some things about like creating darts and things like that when we were working together, which is really interesting. I know that if people buy books, there will be certain numbers that they're given because the person who wrote
Yeah.
the book is actually working off of a certain size. So they'll tell you maybe, oh, your darts need to be 1 inch wide, you know, or they'll tell you that they need to be spaced out a certain distance. And I can tell you that when you're working with different body types, different body shapes, different body sizes, those things are going to change. And that's what I like about draping. You're using a form that's closest to your size, right? And then you're able to determine how wide things should be, how many darts you should have, and all these different elements that you may be misinformed by, depending on what instructions you read about pattern making and about draping. So it kind of gives you the freedom to kind of break the rules, I would say.
Yes, I felt like you had good principles to share, but they weren't actually rules. Like
Yeah,
yeah, you didn't say it must be like this. And you're right. Sometimes, and especially some of the older books, they can give you rules, and it can be kind of limiting.
yeah,
Chacha, I want to go back for just a second, and you
sure.
mentioned posting your more dramatic drapes. And would you tell our listeners where they could see those?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'll tell you how I got started with that first.
Okay.
So I have been teaching in academia for a while. So I started out at um, Moore College of Art and Design in their continuing education department. And then I moved on to the University of Delaware and now at Syracuse University. And I don't know how many teachers we have out there, but it's very time consuming. So you're prepping for classes, you have your classes, and then you have the responsibility of, being able to support your students when they need you, which doesn't leave a lot of time for you to have leisure time or time for you to actually create. So you're teaching these creative techniques to your students, but you don't really have the time to do it on your own. And I found that space where it was like, okay, I need to create space actually for me to do this for my mental health, because I feel like creating is all part of maintaining your mental health. So last summer, I believe it was last summer where I was like, I love draping. So I'm just every morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to do these drapes and it's just going to be on my half scale dress form. I'm going to record myself doing it. I'm going to take pictures and I'm going to have fun with it. And then from there, I think people was like, oh, I didn't know that you could do things like that on a half scale dress form, or I didn't know that you can get these types of results with draping. So I think that's where the interest came in, where it was other people seeing that I was able to get up in the morning, even though I was tired, and do these things that I felt like would be good for me and good for my mental health. Um, so that's how it all started, and it started on a half scale dress form because I don't like to waste fabric, so I use a lot of my scraps. Um, a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what to do with the scraps that I have. That's something that you can do with the scraps that you have, because that's what I do. So I just used my scraps and I just created these different beautiful garments. The beautiful thing about it is that after the videos, after the pictures of these garments, they're kind of gone forever. And
Yeah.
I can't actually recreate those things because I didn't create a pattern for them. It was just me just having on music and kind of like feeling my way through. It's kind of like, I guess, sculpture for fabric.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm feeling my way through it and I'm doing things just based on how I'm feeling. And I can't recreate those things. So I do have a journal of, the videos and the pictures of me creating them. I have the sped up versions of the videos on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And I have the slow videos, like if you want to see step by step, like in real time, those are on YouTube. So if you follow me on Instagram at ChaCha Nicole, you can see like the sped up versions of the videos along with pictures. And then if you want to see like the full process and how I cut everything out and um, each individual piece of me actually creating these garments on the form, you can check out my YouTube, and that's ChaCha Nicole as well.
ChaCha, this draping work that you do, to fulfill your own creative impulses, does it help your students too?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think that students really like to see when their professors are doing things outside of the classroom, because it's kind of like, oh, well, what have you been up to? I want to see what you've been up to, what you've been making, things like that. And it also starts a conversation and dialogue around doing things outside of school and doing um, things with fashion or sewing in your leisure time. Yeah.
When did you know that you wanted to go into teaching fashion design?
Well, when I was in my undergrad program, I was working for a company called Art Online, and we were teaching in a middle school. So that's when I started, and I was like, I really enjoy this. I enjoy teaching people, and I guess it started from there. Um, but with my bachelor's degree, it was a whole thing about. I'll tell you the story, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So when I decided I wanted to teach in academia, I actually put a post on Facebook, and I put the post out there, and I just said, hey, if anybody has any connections or any ideas of how I can start to teach in academia, I'm really interested in things like that. And I got a lot of encouraging words from people, but then I also had people who were like, oh, well, you need this credential and that credential, and it's not really going to work for you, and things like that. I've gotten,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately, there's some people who are, naysayers, and that's fine too. But I think somebody recommended for me to go on LinkedIn. And if they didn't recommend it, maybe it's a thought that I just had. Like, there's people on LinkedIn that I could possibly reach out to. I don't know them personally, but I can reach out because they're doing what I want to do. And I literally like just went through fashion design professors and I sent them a message like, hi, this is my name is ChaCha. This is my background, but I'm interested in teaching in academia. And they all were so very helpful. And they gave me kind of like a recipe to how I can do it. And then also how I could be on the track to tenure. Like they were open to giving so much information. And that was really great for me. That was really
That's
great for me.
wonderful. I think you were so smart
Yeah,
to do that. And I'm sorry about the naysayers, but I'm glad you got so much encouragement. That's great.
it was great. I'm really thankful for those people who did reach back out and, just um, they gave me some tips on how I could do it, but they also told me how they did it, which may not be the same path because we all have our different paths, but it was good to hear how they were able to accomplish this thing too. So I know that sometimes actually gave a talk about this a little while ago at Moore College. And I know sometimes people feel like they don't want to bother somebody by asking them questions. But the people that you would be asking questions have asked questions to other people too. So it's not like you're doing something brand new, and it's not like you're bugging people. I mean, I'm sure that there is a way to approach it that is better than other ways of approaching it.
Yeah.
Um, but some people are eager to help. So I would say, like, if you're interested in a certain path, to reach out to the people that are doing something similar to what you want to do, and I'm sure they'll be open to helping. But then also being open to like not just receiving information, but how can I help this person as well?
I wonder if it ties a little bit into the very field that you're in that you're a teacher, you're sharing information. So I definitely feel from knowing you a little bit that if somebody were to reach out to you for help,
Absolutely.
you would try to share the knowledge that you have.
In any way reasonable that I can, yes, absolutely. Hmm.
So ChaCha, when you started teaching, what was maybe something unexpected that you found out about that your students didn't or did know when they came to your initial classes?
Um, Are you talking about in this current role that I'm in now?
Yeah, your role at Syracuse. Yeah.
Okay, so some students come into a fashion program knowing how to sew. So usually I'm teaching something related to sewing. So I'm teaching sewing, teaching pattern making, teaching draping, those type of like creative studio classes. So some people come in with experience, like maybe they've been making clothes on their own for a while and just working with commercial patterns. There's other people who may have went to a high school that had like a sewing program or a fashion design program. But then there's others who just have been really good at designing, but have never tried to actually create things. It's a learning curve, to say the
Yeah.
least. But sometimes I think students don't really have an idea of how things are made, especially how can they make them themselves. So, there's a barrier or a learning curve with trying to figure out what fabrications to use. Yeah, that's a big thing. And I find that outside of academia too. But some people don't know what fabrics to use for what projects. Um, Also, being overly ambitious. You know, we have
Yes.
we have like 2 weeks to complete this project, and you've never sewn something like this before, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go for it. Which I love that. I actually love that. I love that, you want to kind of push boundaries and things like that. But we also need to kind of will it in just a little bit until we have a little bit more technical experience behind us, and then we can move into things like that. Um, I think I told you about another situation where students weren't sure about the term cut on the fold.
Yes, I
And
thought that was a very funny story. I asked
it
you
was
about, yeah, the kind
it
of
was
things.
so cute.
Yeah.
It was so cute because it's like, okay, so when you're buying fabric from a bolt, it usually has like a crease or a fold, and you usually use that to cut on the fold. But I noticed that some of my students were like getting rid of their muslin or getting rid of their fabric, and they had so much extra left
Like
over.
big
And I'm
pieces
not,
left. Yeah.
yeah, so many pieces left, and I'm not one to waste fabric. We're going to use every bit of this fabric, or we're going to find some way to use it. Um, so they're trying to get rid of these big pieces of fabric, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with this fabric? And it's like, well, I had no more fold left. And it's like, what do you mean you had no more fold left? And that's one of those things where it's like, ugh, I haven't thought through every single piece of this, so I don't know. Like, I wouldn't have known that somebody would have thought that just because I've been sewing for so long. So it just kind of came as second nature to me. That's why I think it's important for professors who are teaching fashion to maybe talk to some people who have no idea about sewing and kind of try to explain things to them and see if you come up with any like questions where it's like, oh, I never thought to explain it this way because I assumed that people would know this. So I never told my students that you can just fold your fabric and create your own fold because
Yeah.
I just assumed that they would know that. And that's not their fault. So
Chacha,
I
when
mean,
did you learn to sew yourself?
when I was 12. Yeah, I learned how to sew when I was 12. I don't know if I told this story on the last podcast, but I learned from my great aunt. She gave me one sewing lesson because the next morning I was going into a like sewing school. It was like a Saturday sewing school,
Okay.
and I think I was probably a little nervous, so I just wanted to get like a kind of like a heads up on maybe what we would be learning, or maybe how to just thread the sewing machine and thread a bobbin because I didn't know any of that. So yeah, she taught me. We had one session at her house. After that, I was at a Saturday sewing school until um, I was 12, and I didn't want to wake up early on a Saturday. So they gave my spot away, um, which was like,
I was
oh,
going to ask
okay.
you if the sewing school was that your idea? Is that something you went to your mom or dad and said, "Oh, I really want to do this"?
Yeah. Yeah. I went to my mom. I told her that I wanted to sew, but I really don't know where it came from, and I wish that I did.
Okay.
It was before Project Runway, so it wasn't like the influence of Project Runway or any of those shows. So I don't know exactly where it came from, but I wish that I knew. I did know that my Aunt Dee, who had passed actually recently, she was making her own clothes. I've never seen her make clothes, but I saw pictures of clothes that she made, and I wonder if that was it. I mean, it's a possibility that I heard that she was making her own clothes, and I saw pictures, and then from there I was inspired. That's a possibility.
When you were a kid, did you sketch or draw your own clothes? Did you have ideas about how you wanted to change or make original designs?
So I would sketch. And I actually had a sketchbook that I would bring to school. And like every week, I would design new designs and I would hand the book off to my friends and they would pass it around the classroom and they would put their initials on the designs that they actually wanted me to make for them. I mean, it never really happened, but it was kind of like I was taking orders, but actually
Yeah.
didn't make, didn't make anything. But I saw what people were interested in. So I
Oh,
guess it
that's
was
fabulous. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it was kind of like we would do now just on social media. Like, hey, I'm thinking about creating this design. Would you buy this design? So I guess it's something like that.
And when you started college, did you go right into a fashion design program or you did?
I did. I went right into a fashion design program after high school, but my initial idea was that I only applied to one school because I was like, I'm going to go to SCAD. That's the school that I'm going to go to, you know? And my mom was like, you don't want to apply to any other schools. And I'm like, no, because this is where I'm going. And I was so excited. And then we took the drive to SCAD and I was like, I think it was like 14,
Oh,
15
I'm sorry,
hours.
ChaCha. Would you spell out the acronym? I'm not sure if everybody's familiar.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Savannah College of Art and Design.
Okay, thanks.
So
So,
we drove from Philly to Savannah and that was about like 14, 15 hour drive. And when we got there, I told my mom like, "Oh no, mom, this is too far." And she was like,
okay.
"You knew how far it was before we left the house." So we went to the tour. It was beautiful, but I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do this." Um because I love to be close to my family even though I'm not like in close proximity to them now. Like when I was younger, I'm like I have to be close to my family. I have to be close to my mom. Um but that was too far. So I had to come back home and really like figure out where am I going to go because I didn't apply anywhere else. So I ended up at the Art Institute of Philadelphia. So, and it was good because their semester didn't start until I think October, when the rest of the universities or colleges were starting in August, like the end of August. So it gave me a little bit of wiggle room in order for me to start. But yes, that was my initial. Because usually I'm the type of person where it's like, okay, if I'm going to do something, that's exactly what I'm going to do. There doesn't really need to be a plan B, C, D. Like, no, this is what I'm going to do. But because that didn't quite work out, I had to create a new plan, and it worked out. So.
And when you started studying fashion design, what was your favorite like initial class that you took?
Mm, I would say it was probably pattern making because even though I was sketching in high school, it wasn't about actually the designing part that got me excited. It was more so me creating patterns on my own. Like I would create patterns using newspaper. And honestly, I try to think back on it now and I don't know how I did it, but things just kind of worked out. So I guess a lot of trial and error, but I was able to make patterns with newspapers and that was more appealing to me than actually designing itself.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
What do
so
you
pattern
think
making.
you really enjoyed about pattern making? Maybe the precision?
Oh, it could be the precision, but it could also be. I mean, I also like math too. So I'm a math person, so I like math too. So that could possibly be part of it. Um, and I guess like creating this flat thing right? You're creating like designs on this flat piece of paper, and then all of a sudden you're able to make it 3D. So I think that that's part of it too, like going from the 2D to the 3D, and knowing that you were able to create that using like mathematics, which is
Was it easy for
interesting.
you to visualize like what a garment, what a pattern was going to look like in 3D, or was that a skill that you really developed as you studied?
No, I think it was easier for me to actually visualize it. Like I can look at a garment now and kind of map out, like just by looking at the garment, kind of map out. I don't know the exact measurements, but I can map out what the pattern would look like.
Yes, I see. I
Yeah.
think that that is, I mean, I think it's definitely a skill you can learn. But I also think that it is a talent that does come naturally to some people.
To some people.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that if you it doesn't mean that if you don't like if you can practice, like you can practice and actually kind of hone in on that skill. So it
Oh,
doesn't mean that
absolutely.
if you
Yeah.
don't have it intuitively that you can't actually learn it and work on it and get better at it. I would say that.
Absolutely. I think the more you work on patterns, oh my gosh, and the more you work on um, fitting patterns to your body and you start to get to know how different shapes and adjustments of curves and so on are going to relate to how that garment actually fits on your body,
Hmm.
that is definitely a skill that you can develop.
Yeah, I think that probably the hardest thing that you could do is probably make your own clothes. And people think that it's making clothes for other people. That comes with its own set of uh, difficulties.
Yes.
But making clothes for yourself, fitting yourself can be difficult. And
Oh,
we actually touch on that in the course, in the
yes,
draping
we
course.
do.
Hmm.
Yes. Because seeing how it's, once you have the form that is close to your body measurements, well, first
Hmm.
understanding your body measurements, understanding your shape, and then seeing how the fabric looks on there, and then that step of taking the muslin drape and turning it into a pattern. Yeah, you get to see that whole process. And I mean, we've written hundreds of articles about fitting different parts of the body, different ways of fitting and threads, and it's still a challenge. But
Yeah,
I think the more you practice making garments, the better you get at it. Definitely.
but you have so many great resources through Threads in order to
Thank you.
actually like, yeah, because I hope that when people take this course, they do utilize, all that Threads has to offer. Because there's so many articles, there's other videos that you can watch. There's so much that you can like incorporate into your learning just from the course that we did and the resources that Threads has. It's amazing.
Yes, I mean it's let's see, it's over 35 years now for that Threads has been in publication. Yes.
Wow. We need to have a party.
Yes, yes, we
35
should.
year anniversary
We
party.
thought about having one for the 200th issue, and now we're up to 222. We'll set a big milestone,
Yeah.
and yeah, we need to have another event is what we need to have. So
Oh, that would be
we
great.
used to have the Threads experience in New York City, which was really wonderful, but then the pandemic. We'll get back to that.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad because so many people I'm sure would be excited about it. I'm excited about it.
It's really fun to get to see other sewers in person. And that
Mhm.
was one of the reasons I was excited about going to your studio and getting to actually work with somebody in person. So much is long distance now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you some more about your students. And do you frequently see students come into your classes and they already have some sewing skills? Like, where do young people learn to sew now?
Some people do, and I would say a lot of them maybe go on YouTube to look at different sewing tutorials. But I think on YouTube, that's also the problem arises when there's assumptions about what people know. Because at least from what I know, students have come to me, and it's not just students in academia, but outside, have come to me about, I watched this video like 10 times and I still don't get how they got from this point to this point. But it's usually because they assume that you know those things that's in the middle, the things in between. Um, so, like I said, it's on us as instructors to make sure we're able to kind of bridge that gap and make sure that there's no assumption there about things. Even in beginner videos, sometimes they don't have like threaten your sewing machine before you start. And it's like, well, I didn't know that I had to do this, this, and that. And it's like, well, yeah, because there's an assumption there that you would know that. Yeah.
What are some ways that fashion design is changing for students and for the ways that you teach classes?
Well, usually when it comes to like design, pattern making, draping, principles seem to kind of stay the same. But there's a whole new realm that we're getting into with 3D design, which is like, it's the future of fashion. If anybody wanted to know what the future of fashion is, that is it. 3D design is the future of fashion. And, that's changing how students are working. That's changing how the industry is working. That's changing how production is done. It's also changing what we're using in order to create our prototypes and to do fittings. Like, I don't know if people know, but fittings are being done on a computer with an avatar now. Like, I know that
I recently
yeah.
saw an article about how some businesses on Savile Row are, tailoring suits and sending them worldwide by doing virtual fittings. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing.
And
And it's fun. At least to me, it's fun.
you showed me a design you had generated. I think is it Close 3D or Close 3D?
Clo.
Clo 3D.
CLO. Mm-hmm.
CLO
3D.
3D. And so could you tell our listeners a little bit about that program? I thought it was fascinating, and it was really fun to see the prototype you had made virtually and then the real design on a model on a runway.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I'm going to tell you that the one that I showed you was actually done the opposite way. So usually
Oh,
you would
okay.
create the design first on Clo. You have your patterns on Clo. You can print those out and actually sew up that garment for a finished garment. But you could also see the prototype on the avatar. But what I did was I went back to a previous collection that I created. And then from there, use that design, not the pattern for it, because I don't know where that pattern is. Um, but I used the design to create a pattern in Clo. And then I was able to try that prototype onto an avatar in Clo 3D. So in Clo, you have a 2D window where your patterns, that's where they lay. And then you also have your avatar on the other side, which is the 3D side. And you're able to see how those patterns, how they create a prototype for that 3D body. It's so cool. So cool.
Do you usually work on the 3D side? So if let's say you have a design on a virtual model and you're working on the 3D side, do you see the pattern pieces, the shapes change in real time?
Yes.
Oh, see, that's fascinating. And you can design vice versa too, right? Can you adjust the pattern pieces and see the garment
You can
change? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that fascinated me about that was how realistic the fabrics and textures were.
Oh, you can pick any fabric that you want. Like there's a fabric library where you can pick any fabric. You can change the colors. You can drop in prints, and it's just amazing. If anybody is into like techie stuff, I would say try it out. Especially if you have at least some knowledge of like Photoshop and Illustrator, because I found that it was maybe a little bit easier for me to kind of figure things out because I'm already used to using like CAD programs. Um, but it's so fascinating. It's interesting. So if you're interested in things like that, you should do it.
Okay. I've seen a few short YouTube videos, and actually the ones that I saw, I didn't even get into the garment design. They were talking about like different leather textures, and you could design bags and shoes, and it's amazing. But you found it to be pretty accurate?
Yes, yes, it is. And it also depends on the avatar that you have. So we talk a little bit um, in the course about the Alvin form that I have, which is right in back of me. But they also have Alvin avatars, which come in
Oh, yeah.
different body shapes and sizes. I actually went on, they had a virtual information session yesterday about their new line of petite forms. So petite in plus
Oh,
and
okay.
also petite in smaller straight sizes. So that was interesting too. It's so many different body types in it's interesting to learn the ins and outs of how to design for those different types of bodies.
Yes, and we can put a link to Alvanon at the forms in
Okay,
the show notes for this episode because you did have a fantastic form. It was really nice to
thank
see
you.
the difference between your form. Do you want to mention a little bit about how the Alvanon forms are different from, say, a standard dress form?
Okay, so you can just tell by looking at the forms that they're a lot different. So when you came to my studio, I had two forms side by side. Both of them are supposed to be a size 20. And then you see one that kind of looks like one of the smaller forms just kind of blown up in proportion. You know, nothing is really changing. It still has a pretty, like a relatively smaller waist and things like that. It does,
Yes.
yeah, doesn't really have much hips, things like that. But with the Albanine forms, you can get them to have like, a bigger bust, um, a bigger waist, also showing the curves of the body. Like I haven't seen any forms besides the Albanine forms, and maybe I don't know if there's some way for people to comment on this video and let us know if they've seen any other companies that's creating forms like this. I haven't seen any that weren't custom. I'm going to say that that showed what a real body looks like. Also, with the forms that you usually buy, they have like the collapsible shoulders. With the Albanine form, you have options for collapsible shoulders, collapsible hips. You also have an option for if you're doing clothes that for people with a belly, like those who are expecting. So they have a tummy that you can
They
take
have like
off.
a maternity belly add-on, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can take it off and you can put it on. It's just like, wow. Like I've done videos where you can see on my page where I post about it and like unboxing of these forms, and they're just great. They're just great forms. But there are, if anybody's interested, companies where you can get a custom form made where it would be to your exact size. You would do a body scan
Oh,
with your
yes.
phone. You would need somebody to do the body scan for you, and then it would upload to an app, and that information is then given to the manufacturer, and they do literally like they create a form that's the same size as your body. They also do it at half scale too for anybody that's interested.
Oh, yes. And we've done a number of articles about some different options to create or purchase your own dress form, and we'll have some of those in the class materials for your class
Hmm.
too. So, Tata, you're not only a teacher; you're also a student, and
I
you're
am.
yeah. You want to talk a little bit about what you're studying and when you will be able to be done with your degree program.
Sure. So my bachelor's is in fashion design, my master's is in fashion and apparel studies, and my PhD is in apparel merchandising and design. So it's been fashion all the way through. But it's funny because the last time I was on this podcast, I was like, yeah, so I may be starting the PhD program, fingers crossed. And now I'm almost a year into the program, which is just like mind blowing because I can't believe it went that fast. So for my master's thesis, I basically talked about or researched improving fit for the average American woman. And then for my research, the average American woman was a size 20. So I was creating basically a sloper or a block um, to fit different size 20s. So when I say different size 20s, it was all of the participants were considered to be a size 20, but all of them had different body shapes. So basically what we need to do is we need to consider not only the person's size as far as numbers, but also the shape of the body, because different bodies gain weight differently. So all of the patterns are going to be different. In order for us to have it fit their body correctly, the patterns are going to be different for different shapes, not just different sizes.
Oh, absolutely. And ChaCha, so there are the typical circumferences we think about in terms of size, and then I'm
Yes.
sure a lot of patterns are based on. And I always experienced this myself, where like I could hit the three numbers on a pattern, say the bust, waist, and hips, but the finished garment did not fit me at all
Hmm.
because of lengths or the shoulder width. So I think
There's so many other
that's
things to consider.
yeah.
So for my PhD, I'm still kind of up in the air. Maybe if you ask me in another 2 months, I'll have a concrete answer for you, because I actually need to have an answer like now. But I don't know if I want to continue that research for my dissertation. I mean, I will continue that research, but I don't know if it's going to be the topic of my dissertation, because I'm also interested in creative spaces.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's a thought of mine about researching creative spaces for fashion, but also functional design. So creative spaces where people can create functional clothing, or even adaptive clothing, things like that. So there's so many interests that I have, but I need to narrow it down to figure out what this dissertation is going to be about. I have 2 years left. 1 year, I believe, is just going to be all coursework, and then the final year is going to be all dissertation. But I need to figure that out now. I have so many interests. Everything is just so like fascinating in fashion. And I know it's probably people like, well, how do you get your PhD in fashion? Like, are you just making pretty clothes? And it's like, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. Like, we are researching fashion as a whole. We're researching why people wear the things that they wear, what influences that, consumer behavior. Like, there's so many different avenues you can go down when researching fashion. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I know when we were working together, there was one evening where you had paper due. And
That's
and
every
I
evening.
think the next day I asked you about the paper, and I thought this was fascinating because it actually tied into something I had been talking about with a friend, and that was how we decide what we want to sew and what we want to wear.
Mhm.
And you were talking about the paper, and how I think it reflected on different personas and like what our true selves are.
Yeah. Even that is just so interesting, because it really makes me second guess the idea of a true self, because we have the person that shows up. And I don't think people like to admit it, that, they change depending on who they're around, what they're doing, the circumstance. But even though there is a part of you that kind of stays true in all of that, there's some things that kind of tweak depending on who you're around and what you're doing. So you have,
Absolutely. Everybody
your
has different roles. Yeah.
yeah,
And
you
we
have
we
yourself
may
and your
switch them very quickly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you may switch them very quickly and not even really notice or think about it when you do it. Because you're going to work and you have that persona, and then you're like, for me, I go to work, I have that persona, and then I'm teaching, it's that persona, and then it's me teaching online, which may even be a different persona, because I have to be able to like give information in a way where it's conducive to this, just this laptop,
Yes. Yes.
with
That small interface right there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's different. Me being around, not even just being around friends, because we can't generalize in that way, but it depends on which friends I'm around at the time. We start to pick up like habits that some of our friends have, or even like slang or words that they say. And that's how we connect to those people. So with different friend groups, it's going to be a different persona. And then when I'm by myself, that's also very different. So
Yes.
it's very interesting. And then it's not just maybe in the way that we act, but it's also in the way that we dress. You're going to dress differently in different situations. You dress differently when you're by yourself. You dress differently when you're, feeling your best, and then you dress differently when you're not. When you need a boost of, self-esteem, you may dress a bit differently. So it's all these things to consider, and they're really interesting.
I feel as though people who sew, and then people who sort of take it a step further and really go into fashion design, that expression of, maybe it's more than one persona, but that expression is very important to them, and
Yeah.
having creative control over that. Yeah.
Right. Especially when they don't see whatever way they're feeling inside. Especially if you don't see it in the stores, like a way to
Yes.
express it through apparel that's already available, then you want to kind of create your own. And that's the way that you're able to show to the world, who you are. And that's why it's so, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get into this, but that's why it's so important to have representation. I talked to my class about this the other day, and we talked about like diversity and inclusion. And usually people think like, okay, well, maybe it's like, black and white. So incorporating black models into things so that people who are black can see them and say like, oh, I see myself in them. But it's not just about that. It's also about size. It's also about ability. There's so
Yes.
many, yeah, there's so many different like constructs that um, we need to see represented in the fashion industry. But that's probably a whole nother conversation.
That is a very big conversation. But I did want to ask you about, I mean, there is a lot of negative press, I think, about fashion right now. Just the size of the industry, waste that goes on, fast fashion, signs of non-inclusivity. But I wanted to ask you about what's hopeful to you in the future of fashion and sewing, and like what really inspires you coming from your students.
Um, well, I have the pleasure of teaching a class now, and it's contemporary issues in the fashion industry. And we not only like we talk about sustainability, but we talk about so much more. And I also have my students interview people that are in the industry that's trying to make change, like who's trying to interrupt the things that are going on now that may not be great for the fashion industry. So what makes me hopeful is that these students, they know that they have a voice, and they are not afraid. They're not afraid to vocalize the things that they're thinking. And I've seen that firsthand, but that makes me excited because they're not just going to go for the things that they hear. They're going to ask questions, and they're going to challenge things.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful to hear. Yeah. Well, ChaCha, that is definitely a topic for our third episode when we get to that. It's been wonderful talking with you. We've used up our time for this episode, but
Oh my gosh, is it over already?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it is so fun to
I'll be
talk to
back
you,
part
and it
three.
was really fun to work with you, and we'll definitely have you back again. And by the time this episode comes out, your class, Fashion Draping Fundamentals, will be available. So I urge our listeners to check out ChaCha's class.
Yes, please check it out. It has a wealth of information, and I'm also going to be available to do like videos where you're able to interact with me, and we're going to be able to talk through it. And if you have any issues, you can raise those questions to me. I'm excited. I'm excited
too. Yes, we will have a series of live Q&As with ChaCha that coincide with the class. So I think that will give people that real chance to connect with you and have that instructor feedback.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Also, this summer, I'm hoping to be able to do a tour where I'm able to go to different cities and host small classes. So keep your eye out for that too.
Oh, ChaCha, that's great. That'll be a lot of fun. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Okay, keep us posted about that.
I sure will.
Thank you to our guest for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send your comments, questions, and suggestions to th@taunton.com. And please like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're listening. It helps others find our podcast. Until next time, keep on sewing with threads.